All right, Florida. Number 5, Texas. Texas, 21.5-point favorite. The over-under I have. 0.5 snaps for DJ Lagway. Great news. Just to hear that the hamstring injury isn't as bad as initially feared, according to Billy Napier. He is not ruling out the idea of being able to play against Texas. Brutal spot to be in if the trainers at Florida leave this up to Billy Napier. That would be awful, because if he gets hurt and aggravates that injury against Texas and plays and defies kind of the odds and the optics of last week, Billy's getting blasted for rushing him back, and you're not beating Texas. Like, that's just it'll be obvious if and when that happens. I hope that does not happen.
You're so right. And I just went through the full thing of emotions of going, wow, it's come to this where I'm really rooting for DJ Lagway and hoping he plays. And I went, wait, I might not be rooting for DJ Lagway hoping he plays, because, yeah, I mean, Texas's defense is awesome. They have great pass rushers. They're a very physical defense. And the Florida line's not been great. And so, yeah, to your point, that's never what we want to see, especially in college sports, which is a coach fighting for his job with a kid between him and kind of in the middle. It's a rough situation. You don't want that to be up to the player. You honestly don't want to be up to the head coach.
Yeah, unique, because he is fighting for his job. And this is a true freshman quarterback who has a bright future. And I don't know, like, it's a little bit different when your next best option is a Yale transfer. Did you know that Aiden Warner went to Yale? I don't know if it's gamesmanship at all with Napier, but at the same time, I'm not going to be surprised if DJ Lagway, the Texas native, wants to play in this football game back in his home state. He's like, look, I feel like I want to fight for my coach. I want to do whatever I can. Tape me up. I don't think you could tape a hamstring. I don't know how that works. They've got tape for everything these days. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't think you could truly rule out the idea of DJ Lagway playing. I would have never in a million years thought that was on the table on Sunday. With the optics of getting carted off the field, everybody's around you, and Billy calling it at halftime a significant injury to a prize quarterback. I would doubt that we're going to have any sort of insight on this until probably some sort of Pete Thamel tweet, maybe an hour or two before this game. That would be my expectation moving forward. It could be a true game time decision. Get out there, see if this hamstring tape that I've just talked up works for you, and you feel like you can actually move. I don't know. But either way, it's a brutal task. It is a brutal task for the Florida quarterback against this Texas defense, who, by the way, is coming off of a bye week. Texas this year, these rankings, coming off of games against Carson Beck, who is what he is in 2024, but Diego Pavia as well. Part of that sample size worth remembering. Texas's defense this year is number 1 in FBS in yards per play allowed. They're number 1 in FBS in passing yards per game allowed. Number 1 in FBS in passing TDs per game allowed. You know what? I'm tired of saying number 1 in FBS. Just assume it's number 1 in FBS until I tell you that it's not. They're also number 1 in quarterback rating allowed. They're number 1 in 10-yard pass plays allowed. Number 1 in 20-yard pass plays allowed. Number 2 in FBS in scoring defense. Number 2 in FBS in red zone TDs allowed. Texas
Surely
defense
this must be the best defense in the SEC, right, Connor? If they've had another defense on their home turf, they'd be the best defense.
You know, on that day, on that night, Texas was not the best defense on its own field. Georgia very much earned that title for what they did in Austin. But yeah, it's kind of weird.
I've got to where I could hear the Georgia fans in the back of my head. They're barking. So I had to let you know. Because you're right. I was with you about PK. They're having an amazing defense. For a night, though. We can't forget about Georgia.
It's kind of weird. You could look at a lot of different metrics and probably make a case for 4 different SEC teams as having the best defense. Like, who's the best on their best day? Yeah. Georgia would probably have that title. Tennessee right now is number 1 in Max Olson's stop rate, which I think is still really significant. Ole Miss gets in the backfield way more than anybody else in the SEC. We're going to get to that in a bit. And obviously they're top 3, top 5 in a lot of these metrics. So you can kind of pick and choose in a lot of different ways, but Texas certainly part of that conversation without a doubt. We're late enough into the season where I don't think you can just strictly look at quarterback play and say that it's benefited just because of that.
Yep. And
if they're going to see Yale transfer Aiden Warner in this one, favorable. He's going to have a banged up backfield. Unfortunately, Trey Wilson, an injury riddled season for him. The guy expected to be Florida's number 1 receiver this year, he is out for the season. If you're a Florida fan, you're just wondering, is there a path? What in the world is the path at Texas as a 3-touchdown dog? I think there's a path, and it's pretty obvious. We're not necessarily coming up with anything revolutionary by saying this. It's turnovers. 100% Quinn Ewers turnovers. Easier said than done. If Florida is still without its top 3 defensive backs like it was at the end, or I shouldn't say top 3, but starting defensive backs like it was at the end of that Georgia game. But Texas has thrown 14 picks this year. And again,
you got to get after them early. That's the key. If you don't have a first or second drive pick against Quinn Ewers, you just pack it in.
Texas is the ace pitcher who once they settle in, you're in trouble. It's going to be 6 or 7.
They give up the leadoff home run. They settle in. You better get your damage early.
You better put up that crooked number in the first frame. If you don't, it's going to be some tough sledding. It might be a long night at the dish. I think that Florida has to capitalize on that. And I think it could. I think we could actually see Florida keep it close in the first half. And it's another one of those Texas home games where you're kind of just wondering, when's Texas going to turn it on? When are they really going to pull away? And maybe it's something like 14-10 at the break. And Ewers has thrown 2 picks without a fully healthy version of Isaiah Bond, who is hoping to be able to return for this one. I'm still taking Texas to win, but I'm going to go 28-13 and say that this is another instance in which Florida shows fight, just kind of like what it's been doing the last month and a half here. But it's pretty obvious by day's end, they just don't have enough dudes. They just don't have the depth that you need to pull off an upset like this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I mean, Florida's defense, we previewed it coming into the last game. They weren't super turnover prone. They're good at other things. Luckily, they played Carson Beck, so they now look turnover prone in the aggregate. They are playing Quinn Ewers, very similar type of lad. Their game was a masterclass in how to not protect the football with 200 Texas played. So I agree. I think they'll have at least a pick or 2. Florida, you're not going to win this game with your third string quarterback in Austin, right? I'm not trying to break any news
transfer.
Here. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Winter Park legend. Yeah. Look, you got 3 games after this. 1 or 2 of them are winnable. Okay. So the big thing you can't do, I know I hit on it earlier, but the big thing you can't do is go trot Lagway out there, have some optically horrible moment that ruins your season. All right. Lose this game. Just go lose it. And then start over. You got 3 games. If you go 2-1, you probably save your job. If you go 1-2, depending on how you win the 1, you might save your job. Winning Texas, probably not in the cards, just because to your point about depth, this is a top 5 team. You played Georgia close and should have had them, but the quarterback play stopped you there already within the context of a game where your defense was playing well. So I think you got to just win the war instead of the battle here, because, and this is like a wedge issue for me. We've talked about it a little bit, but I like Dennis Allen. I was out on him from the time that he played Jameis Winston hurt against the Bucs, like week 3 of year. I was out, and I've talked about Saban playing 2 up 38-0 against Mississippi State. That's just one of those things I do not play with. Like I just think it's not fun to get your guy out there when you don't really, when you don't need to. So if he's nursing an injury, so point being, focus on these next couple of games. If you give Texas a run for their money, cool. But all your goals are technically still in front of you, not to win the SEC, but to survive another year, keep Lagway. And the key for keeping Lagway is not to get him re-injured.
I think the optics of that would just be so bad. You know how this works. I mean, it would immediately fall back on Napier, even if there was some sort of a closed door meeting where Napier says, "Man, I can't trot you out there," and Lagway just gives this impassioned speech of, "Coach, I want to fight for you. I want to do right by you. Let me test it. Let me see what it's like pregame, and then we can make that decision. But just give me the chance to be able to travel. Give me the chance to be able to suit up for this one." And then the mojo's going, and Billy's like, "All right, kid, I put all my eggs in your basket anyways. Might as well do it one more time. Let it ride." I would
start the game. Have him do a handoff. How about that? Start Lagway. Have him do a handoff. Get him out of there. Compromise.
Just the fact that it was non-contact makes me worry so much, and I get that it's not as serious as they initially feared, and that is great. And I hope that we see more DJ Lagway in 2024 if he is right. But yeah, that would just be disastrous. I would just hate to see that for all parties involved. That would just be brutal. But yeah, this is not a Texas. Do not let Florida hang around. Do not let Florida hang around with the way that they have been feeling. They've played like a team with nothing to lose, except when it came to going for 2 at the end of Tennessee, in which case they tightened up at the worst possible moment. But I would, if I'm Texas, I am hoping that those first quarter turnover issues do not surface once again against Florida.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like I've always, not always, is I've made some jokes at Florida's expense. Right at this point, I am rooting for the storylines. Right, like I said, I think their season's still on the table. I'm not trying to root against Florida or do any of that stuff. So don't take it as that. I like watching Lagway play, and I want him to be a great player. And that's it. And so yeah, I think at the end of the day, like I said, just take the schedule loss here and move on. Like you can win a couple of these next games, and I genuinely am rooting for them because I want to see how this goes. I've never seen this before, where a defense turns around the way it has here, and now we got the quarterback situation. So fascinating. Let's keep the season going.